He wants to actually claim to be a woman. And the only way he can do that is to deny that biological sex is real or exists. The only thing that makes it work is if other people are prepared to lie. Do women have a right to single-sex female spaces? He didn't just shoot himself in the foot. He got out his AK-47 and blew both his legs off. Only gender identity ideology does this to people. Makes them stupid. Once you lose the judiciary, we have no hope at all.
Hi everyone. For the last 2 weeks, the Sandie Peggie versus NHSFife and Dr. Upton Tribunal has been in full swing, and it looks set to be a landmark case. It's had loads of media attention, has already led to a directive from the Judicial Office on pronoun use, saying that calling a man she, her can be highly inappropriate, and has been discussed in Parliament. What is the case about? It's about Sandie Peggie, a senior nurse with 30 years of experience, and a junior doctor called Dr. Upton, who had only been at the hospital for about 6 months before things kicked off. Dr. Upton is a bloke, but he claims to be a lady. I'm a lady! And he has been using the women's changing room.
Where are the changing rooms?
Right, the men's changing rooms are just over there.
And the ladies?
Now, apparently, NHSFife said that he could.
Thank you, I found it!
But Sandie was like, hold on, there's a bloke in the ladies' changing room. I feel uncomfortable. She raised these concerns, but was told that there was nothing they could do to exclude this man from the women's changing rooms because of his magical lady feels.
I have a lady's name because that's what I am, a lady!
Then on Christmas Eve 2023, they're both in the changing room at the same time, and Sandie says, look, you shouldn't be here. The fragile lady doctor is terribly upset and reports this to management, also contacts his union, and before you know it, Sandie is suspended. Sandie then goes, hang on, this is victimization, discrimination, and harassment. I'm taking you to a tribunal. And here we are. So what Sandie and her legal team have to prove is that this is the case. But inevitably, this goes into, do women have the right to single-sex spaces? And at what point is a woman in a woman-only space allowed to feel uncomfortable sharing it with a man and voicing it? The hearings have been intense and downright bizarre, so I thought I'd get together with family lawyer Sarah Phillimore to discuss what went down. Before we get into it, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, like the video and leave a comment. If you don't know what to say, just say, I stand with Sandie Peggie. If you want to support my channel, please join my Patreon or send me some love via PayPal or leave a tip via Super Thanks here on YouTube. Okay, let's go. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you.
And you've been, like myself, following this tribunal with interest, huh?
Oh, yes.
Obviously, I'm looking this as a non-legal person, but you are a family lawyer. So I'm very interested in how you feel the tribunal has gone so far and the approach, shall we say, that the barrister for the NHS and Dr. Upton took. I mean, I had a bit of an argy-bargy with someone online who was anonymous, but I think they were in the legal field. Because I put a question out saying, how can Jane Russell, the barrister for the NHS and Dr. Upton, how can she, in good conscience, argue that this man is not her man? And then the person I was chatting with said, well, that's a really unwarranted thing that you're saying there, because a barrister takes a case and takes instructions. So if the barrister is told, you have to argue that this man is not a man, then she's just doing her job, and it's not for you to say that there's something wrong with her for doing that.
I don't agree with that. Yes, you have to take your client's instructions unless they're completely insane. But part of the core duty for barristers is you must also be honest. Now, the really weird thing for me as a lawyer, I'm not a discrimination lawyer, but I feel after 6 years, I may well be.
You identify as a discrimination lawyer.
Well, it seems to work for everyone else. There you go. I identify as a judge of the High Court, and this is all bollocks. But what we've had is a string of astonishing cases. A Kua Reindorf case, he called them astonishing. And she's right. I don't think there's ever been any other area of law, any other period of time where we've had case after case after case of victories. And I think it's right, isn't it? Jane Russell, wasn't she involved in Maya Forstater's case? Wasn't she the barrister for the other side?
Yes, she was. And Maya won. This was the judgment that changed everything. Jane also represented the other side in the Alison Bailey case against the Chambers, which Alison won.
So
The Garden
she's
Court Chambers.
steeped in all of this. And to say you can run a case on the basis that Dr. Upton is not a man, well, that is not what the law provides. That is a niche projection of a certain ideology. So I think she can be criticised for putting questions in that way, because it isn't settled fact that you can just say, oh, I'm a woman. I mean, he doesn't have a gender recognition certificate. The closest he could get in the law as it stands, and I'll happily be corrected by proper discrimination lawyers, but as I understand it, if you have a GRC, it's going to be more difficult to exclude you in certain circumstances because you'll have what's called a legal sex. And I think that was the whole argument in Scotland, wasn't it? That to get women on panels or something, you could slip under the radar with the GRC because you had a legal sex. But the Equality Act is very clear that even men with GRCs can be excluded from single-sex spaces because they are not women. The definition in the Equalities Act of a woman and a man is an adult human male and adult human female. Dr. Upton is not an adult human female, and he does not have a GRC. So he has no legal sex, and he certainly has no biological female sex. So I can sort of see where that person was coming from. Yes, as a barrister, your duty is to the client and the court. But I think to assert that Dr. Upton is a woman is not something that any barrister should be doing. It's not backed up by law. It's certainly not backed up by fact.
Right. And one thing I said is, but that's like saying that you're instructing your barrister to argue that the sun goes around the moon. It doesn't. And then this person went, well, if that's the instruction, then this needs to be argued in court.
You're not just
unless you have a legal precedent.
You're not a meat puppet whose client jerks your strings. There has to be some degree of recognition of reality and common sense. And I will sometimes, it's quite rare, I have to say this to clients, because most are sensible. They want to win. And they've come to you because you'll give them advice on the law and strategy and chance of success. And I can say things like, that is a really stupid argument and it's not going to help you and the judge won't like it. But if someone were to, and no one's ever done this, but if someone were to say, I want you, Sarah, to argue that the earth rotates around the sun, or which is that the right way? Well, no, the sun rotates around the earth, whichever is the wrong one.
The sun goes around the moon.
Yeah, or I would say, no, I cannot do that. I mean, first of all, I can't mislead the court. My duty to the court is as important as my duty to a client. And this is the look, I think we've got to the crux of this problem. Only gender identity ideology does this to people, makes them stupid. And we've seen that with the evidence now of the nurses in the Sandie Peggie case, where they couldn't even answer a simple question from Naomi Cunningham. Does changing your clothes or cutting your hair alter your sex? They could not answer. Now, I don't think there's any other topic in the history of time where people have been so stupid. I'm sorry to use pejorative words, but either everyone involved in this is dishonest, stupid, gullible, or afraid, probably a combination. And for this barrister, Jane Russell, who's certainly been involved in some of these high-profile cases, to still be banging this drum is, I think, really, really curious.
And rather aggressively.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, some barristers use that as a tactic. I think it's a really poor tactic because it's really uncomfortable to listen to. And you're generally announcing, this is all I've got. If you've got a good case, you put it calmly, politely, but firmly, as Naomi Cunningham is doing. If you don't have a good case, then what have you got left to fall back on? Bombast and theatrics. So I don't think it's a good tactic. I mean, obviously, it's more difficult when you're not present in the room, but it does seem from the tribunal tweets that Jane Russell is interrupting a lot and being given a lot of latitude to do that by the judge, which is concerning.
So just to backtrack a little bit, what needs to be established is whether Dr. Upton and NHSFife basically harassed and victimized Sandie Peggie.
I don't think she has to win against both of them. They are both respondents. I think she could win against the hospital, but not Dr. Upton. But it doesn't really matter because they've both been represented by the same barrister. Their cases are being put on an identical footing. Nothing to see here because Dr. Upton is a woman. That is
Right.
their case in a nutshell, isn't it?
Basically, that's it. And even before the tribunal started, there were attempts from their side for it to be like a private hearing, right?
Yeah.
And
And also for Dr. Upton not to be named. And when that failed, for Dr. Upton to be referred to as a woman, and that failed. So I'm really pleased about that, because, of course, that is the nub of what's going on, isn't it? The ability to speak honestly about material reality. So that was all good. But I mean, I must admit, I think some people are concerned that the judge doesn't seem to get it at certain points. I mean, I reserve comment till I see the judgment. But certainly the rulings to have this in public and to allow the other side to call Dr. Upton a man were right.
Yes, but even then there was like a caveat. It couldn't be gratuitous, or it couldn't be done in an
Well, to be
offensive
fair to the
way.
judge, he's just taking the words of the EAT in the Forstnutter case. And I agree with him that this is so much about context. I don't know if you were also following the case of Higgs and Former School, which was really interesting. That judgment came out on the 13th, where
About the Christian
she
woman.
was a Christian, and she put some spicy things on her Facebook. But again, the court were very clear to talk. It's difficult to give guidance. Sorry, I'll give that caveat, because every case turns on its own merits. The different circumstances are infinite, but it's about context, isn't it? It's about power. You look at the setting. You look who is talking to who. So I quite agree. If you were to follow Dr. Upton around the hospital going, "You're a man, a manly man, a manly, manly man, man," you should be sacked. I mean, if you're a nurse doing that, if you're a patient, you should be removed from the hospital premises. But I find it very difficult to see how in a tribunal or court setting, the use of the pronouns would ever be gratuitous. But the judge had to say that, because I think it was an important warning in the EAT and Forstnutter. You've got a right to call him a man, but you mustn't, overplay your hand. As I think, sadly, some people on our side now are getting a bit carried away, and I'm sure it's a product of just being quite angry and fed up and frightened. But
I'm fed up with it all. Yeah,
and I see that, and I don't want to be too harsh, but it doesn't help, because you are then playing into their narrative, the trans narrative of victimization and fragility, etc. But I don't think there was anything sinister in the judge saying that, because it was a warning from the EAT.
Yeah. But I did think it was sinister that they even tried to make it unsayable that Dr. Upton is a man, because surely when you have to give evidence, you need to be able to accurately describe that a man is a man, when that's the whole point.
It's par for the bloody course, isn't it? This ideology survives only on external compliance. It has nothing else. It has no basis in biological reality, nothing. The only thing that makes it work is if other people are prepared to lie. So, of course, it's very important that you get that external compliance. But what this case has done already is been brilliant. I don't know if you're aware of the judicial directive that also came out a few days ago, directly following from the Sandie Peggie case. It said, look, you've got to rein these pronouns back, judges. Certainly, if you're dealing with a case where a woman's been sexually attacked by a man, to expect her to use anything other than male pronouns is unacceptable. And I was also interested to see the advice is also tipping over into my area of law. In family cases, don't be so quick to adopt the pronouns of a transitioning child if there is a conflict in the family. You would think common sense. But before that, we were stuck in that position where Maria McLachlan had to call the man who knocked her to the ground she. And you had the judge in the criminal trial getting pissy with her because she wouldn't call him she. Now, we're moving away from that, and I think that's brilliant. So whatever else happens with this case, that's been one really positive thing, because once you lose the judiciary, we have no hope at all.
Right. Yeah.
What has saved our movement is that the upper courts were not captured. The lower courts certainly were. I mean, you look what happened to Maya in her first hearing. You look what happened to Kate Scotto. She had to appeal. And she was convicted of calling Stephanie Hayden a pig in a wig, which seems quite gentle in our common discussions now. But you see, if you read the comments of the first court that convicted her, they are just really chilling about how we teach our children to be kind. And, I wonder if she got it in the neck more because she was a woman. And, you're not playing by the stereotypes we expect. Because, of course, we all damn well operate by sex stereotypes, even though we deny they exist. So the lower courts were captured. The higher courts were not and are not. And that has been, I think, the only thing that saved us. Well, I say that, but part of the difficulty of the Peggy case is that this is now in a long, long line of cases where the material reality side has won. And yet no one seems to notice or care. I mean,
it takes a while for these things to trickle through in various organizations.
Taking years because this involves a huge amount of money and reputational damage. Now, I don't know if this is true. I heard a rumor that Fife tried to settle and Sandie Peggie wasn't having it. I don't know if that's true or not.
Okay.
If they had any sense at all, they would have tried to settle. I suspect whatever offer they made was pretty ridiculous, but they are now holding themselves out for the world to see just how corrupting this ideology is. Because we haven't just got this nonsense, I don't know what sex is. We also saw, I think that was the evidence yesterday, wasn't it, that due process was completely thrown out of the window. The minute a complaint was made about Sandie Peggie, she was suspended without her side of the story.
Which is interesting, because when she raised the concern, she was told, we can't help you. So again, just to go back to
months for them to even get back to her, didn't it? Didn't she make a complaint over the summer, and then they got back to her in the autumn and said, "Forget it. She's a woman."
There's nothing we can do to exclude.
Dr. Upton makes a complaint on Christmas bloody day, and all the wheels start turning, and she is suspended. Now, on that alone, however captured this judge is, on that alone, she should win. Because that is just an utter denial of due process. I'm not in human resources, but even I know that you hear the other side of the story before you suspend somebody. It's just insane. And it just shows that, yet again, this is the only ideology I can think of which has this effect on people, turns their brains to mush.
Yeah, and Helen Joyce made a good point about this. It doesn't just let organizations wander off course, it completely turns them against their original mission.
Well,
like we've seen with Stonewall.
Well, this was Stonewall's exhortation to go beyond the law. What that translates as is break the law. Now, I was really, really worried because I went to an interesting online seminar about trans rights and advocacy organised by Nottingham University, and had lots of expert international trans advocates speaking. I just, sat there in the background. I wasn't going to be antagonistic because, we don't do that, do we? We like to listen to what people have to say. The really interesting thing was not one of the speakers had any idea what to do. They just spent most of the time talking about how terrible it was. And they had a barrister who came in as the final speaker, and he kept repeating, change will not be won in the courtroom. And I found that really chilling from a barrister, because what is that suggesting? Is that something will happen above and beyond the law? What exactly? What are you saying as a barrister? I mean, he was mumbling on about soft law. I don't understand that. And he didn't explain. Okay. But he was really fond of that phrase and repeated it in his presentation. And I find that really chilling, because we are seeing it now, case after case after case. I mean, was it not enough that with Rachel Mead, her regulator, Social Work England, claimed having a GRC changed your biological sex? Was that utterly ridiculous and fatuous point not enough to wake up some of these organisations? I mean, the Mead case was utterly humiliating for both her regulator and her employer. And then you've got another social worker, Lizzie Pitts. Then you've got Ros Adams, a rape crisis centre, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
I know maybe it takes a bit of a time for the email or the memo or the update to get through. But why are these organisations not realising that what they are doing hurts women and is unlawful? Why are they just ignoring case after case after case? I mean, every case that comes along, I think, this is the one that will blow the doors off. There's another case. We've still got the Darlington nurses. We've got Sarah Summers in Brighton. And it goes on and on and on.
And one thing I'm going to do with Akua Reindorf is go through all these cases and how one builds onto the other and keeps strengthening the sex realist case in general, if you like. But how many of these cases are needed?
But we shouldn't have
And
needed any of them. Maya's case was in the
yeah,
EAT, so an immediate precedent, an appellate court. None of the other cases should have happened, and yet they did. And all right, maybe fair enough. Maybe
yet
with
here we
Rachel
are. Yeah.
Mead, that was fairly soon afterwards. But basically, from 2024, this should not be happening. So maybe Sandie Peggie just swept in. I mean, that was 2023, it all kicked off, wasn't it? But to say it's taken these organisations 2 years to wrap their heads around the actual law is bloody frightening. If there was an important case that happened 2 years ago and I just blithely carried on not knowing about it and not applying it, I think that would be a matter for me to be disbarred. That would be utterly incompetent.
Yeah. And one thing that I had a chat with Michael Foran about is he said that in no other area has he ever seen such misrepresentation of the law.
Yes.
So, and
yeah. Back to Stonewall again. Go beyond the law. Well, first you misrepresent the law. First you slide gender in instead of sex. And that's exactly how Dr. Upton can say, I am a woman, because it's not sex that's important, it's gender. But why he then has to go the next step and deny that sex exists, I don't understand that. I'd have a lot more respect for him if he said, I was bloody miserable as a man. I really enjoy presenting as female. I'd really like to be called she, her. But as a doctor, I am very well aware what my biological sex is. I mean, I would have every respect for that. But the line, where the other side are asking for the line in this case to be drawn, is just terrifying. It's like saying sex doesn't exist. It doesn't matter. Women don't matter. Their safety and comfort doesn't matter. All that matters are the desires of men. That's what they're effectively saying.
So one good thing about this case, I mean, it's a shame that it obviously had to happen and what Sandie's been put through.
Yeah.
But the good thing is, compared to all the other cases, this is now really going head to head, right? These two, like the clash of ideology and reality. Is this a man in the women's changing room, or is it a woman? All the other cases have been more about, right, what you can say, what you can't say, or allegations.
You say that. I do worry because I thought the Adams case was quite similar to this, and that what could be a more stark and brutal testing ground for sex than a rape crisis centre? Because we know what the statistics say. We know who the perpetrators of sexual violence are, and we know who their victims are. And it's it's men versus women. But no, I was really concerned that didn't make bigger waves. And I think you're probably right. This has got it all, hasn't it? Because it's in a hospital setting.
This is it.
With an actual doctor. Yeah.
With an actual doctor in the women's changing room. Whereas with the Ross Adams case, it was about, can you reveal the sex of the person who would be providing the service to someone who needs the services.
Well, it was about reassuring a woman that they would have a single-sex environment. So I do think that when you're talking about victims of rape and people in hospitals, sex is a hugely salient organising category. But no, you're right. This case is much bigger and wider, and it did seem really from the minute that Naomi Cunningham started asking questions that this. Well, no, sorry, not Naomi. It was bloody Jane Russell, wasn't it, who seemed to want to put the whole ideology on trial from the word go. Quite a
from the word go
move.
Right. So when you saw that, like, because I was like, whoa, this is aggressive. But again, I'm not a legal person. I've only started following tribunals in the last couple of years. So from you as a lawyer perspective, where you're like, okay, this is definitely a very aggressive approach or a particular tactic that she's using here.
Yeah, I thought it was unnecessarily aggressive. I mean, obviously, people choose the tactics that they think work, but after doing this job for nearly 30 years, being aggressive, I think, is a really poor strategy. It does suggest that you haven't got anything else, and judges often don't like it. I mean, sometimes if I get really exasperated, I will find myself falling into that trap. But you've always got to be conscious, I think. You're not an effective advocate if you're being aggressive. Advocacy is about persuasion. You draw out your case persuasively. It was an interesting tactic, but I wonder if it's fueled by this overweening sense of moral righteousness. Because I'm always grasping, trying to understand, why are we here? How did we get here? Now, I think a lot of people are frightened. A lot of people are stupid. But I think that the real key toxic element in this stew is this sense of moral righteousness. They hitched their parasitic wagon onto gay rights. I mean, same-sex marriage was overwhelmingly supported, wasn't it? People wanted to cast off the shackles of the past where gay men were beaten up for just existing, to show what, wonderful, evolved humans they were. So there was a very, very effective force teaming to gather all that moral feelings of righteousness. And I wonder whether, is that what's going on? Because the Fife's barristers seem to be, quite scornful of Sandie Peggie and all this nonsense with her husband and liking Trump. And it's this awful thing, this curse of the modern world. And you've seen it in America beautifully, haven't you? If you are right wing, you're disgusting, you're a cockroach. And the right say the same about the left. This utter polarization, that you're actually less than if you don't agree with me. You're no longer really considered human. And I wonder whether that is actually the heart of it. You're a disgusting bigot. I can't believe I'm having to share the same courtroom with you. You've made poor Dr. Beth cry. And maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. I would love to know how we got here, because if we don't understand that, then getting out of this is going to be more difficult.
And how can you avoid it happening again?
Yeah.
Simon Fenshaw made an interesting point. He had a chat with Julie Bindel for The Spectator recently, and he said it's gone from I am right and you are wrong to I am right and you are evil.
Yes. And that's so, so dangerous, because none of us are infallible. Obviously, we have to be ready to listen to other people. And it's such a dangerous step. But I think that is probably the most important reason to explain how we've got here. There's just no wish for any discussion, because why would you discuss with an evil monster? Why? So there's no room for maneuver, is there?
So the first day when Jane Russell was cross-examining Sandie, to me, it just read like a Twitter argument, right? It was the same sort of stupid arguments. And, your husband said this, and that's rather homophobic. And you agree with this? And, your husband posted that on Facebook, and that's rather racist. And you agree with this? And it's like, what? She was just trying to position her as this I think horrible
that's a really
bigot.
Good and terrifying point, because I've just seen one account on Twitter go, if you stand with Sandie Peggie, you're standing with someone who likes Trump. I'm like, well, so fucking what?
Right.
I don't like Trump. He's going to be a disastrous president, but he's right about some things. And one thing he's right about is that there are two sexes. So yes, I will stand with Sandie Peggie unless and until she's convicted of some vile criminal offence. And then I won't.
Yes.
But
also, what is the other option? Is that you go along with men in women's spaces because you don't like Trump. How is that?
I mean, a lot of people have made this point, but it's spot on, isn't it? It's like you have to pick your identity in a bundle.
Yes,
you can't
it's a package deal.
You're presented with a package deal. Yeah, Palestine, woo. Dr. Upton's a woman, woo. And you have to believe every single thing. What the hell has happened? We have the internet, we have access to so much information and great minds. And what do we use it for? Pornography and stupid arguments. And we're becoming more polarized by the day. And it will be the end of our civilization, without wishing to sound hyperbolic. But how on earth can anything progress or develop if you have to be in one of only two camps? I mean, all this, we don't like the binary. It's all becoming very binary, isn't it?
Yeah. And the so-called non-binaries are politically the most binary. So the tribunal's happening. I think that Sandie was very clear whenever she answered questions by Jane Russell, because Jane Russell was just saying, you have a problem with trans people. You have a problem with trans people. And then Sandie just goes, no, I have a problem with males in female changing rooms.
Yeah.
And I think she did so well, because this whole thing, it takes such a toll. It's so stressful.
Well, wasn't that the thing, that Sandie gave her evidence in the normal way, just, by herself. And then Dr. Upton comes in and has 5 additional chairs for his supporters. What is going on? Why is this even allowed? And that immediately sets the scene, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the other really interesting thing about that talk I went to about trans advocacy. Hard baked into all the speeches was this absolute narrative of fragility, a constant claim that they were going to be exterminated. And this is another reason why it is so impossible to progress. Because clearly, I would go so far as to say, I think that Jane Russell believes that. That would explain the antagonism of her cross-examination. Really, really believes that trans people are this very special group who are uniquely at risk of extermination and harm. And anyone who stands against that is therefore just an irredeemable bigot. I mean, I didn't get the chance to witness Sandie Peggie giving evidence. I only got into the tribunal, I think, the next day, and then they cut access. But she did seem to be doing well from the tribunal tweets and, saying, well, my rights are also important. I think she was constantly being handled with, well, what about
dignity
my dignity as a female. I think she managed to get the points across. I don't think... I mean, it is difficult. I mean, tribunal tweets do an amazing job, but you don't get the tone in either party's voice. I didn't get the impression that she faltered or she became irritable. Whereas with Dr. Upton, I think there were lots of examples of being really rather rude. And
that's how deadlines work. And we see more than one patient per shift.
Totally unnecessarily condescending sarcasm, which I don't think is a good idea as a witness.
Right. And asking Naomi questions, apparently. And then the judge went, no, you don't ask the questions. But also Jane Russell did a thing a few times where Dr. Upton had already answered a question, and then Jane Russell raised an objection, and then the judge goes, the question's been answered.
I did get the impression that there was a lot more latitude for objections and interruptions for Dr. Upton's side, which is unfortunate. I think, the judge needs to be even-handed. And these are all important issues. I was a bit disappointed. I think this was this today? Naomi Cunningham was asking the question that really went to the heart of it about some issue of sex, and the judge just cut it off and said, well, have a break now. But look, we don't know until we get the judgment. We can easily speculate or get pessimistic. I think if this goes against her, I would certainly hope there are fertile grounds for appeal, given the nature of the exchanges that I've read. But obviously that is asking a lot of Sandie Peggie, and the emotional toll must be horrific.
Somebody set up a crowdfunder for her, just so she could do something nice, treat herself. And that got, how much?
Over 30 grand.
Over 30 grand. Yeah. Wow.
Dr. Beth, I think about 2 grand to buy some nice treats. And interestingly, Sandie Peggie has said she's just going to give it all to charity. Because obviously that's often the accusation held at us, that we're in it for the grift and we're just in this to make money. So I think it was a really sensible decision. But I think people just wanted an outlet, and it was so interesting just to see how much more money she raised. I think the last time I looked, it was 31,000.
Wow. So, and this is, again, one of the things, right? We're being told that we're grifters and there's nothing, we don't have genuine concerns, right? We're all being vile, or we all have these hidden agendas and everything's a dog whistle. Then Dr. Upton takes the stand, right, so to speak, and is questioned. And the stuff he came out with, I'm like, who's not being genuine here now? And this is where, again, I'm not a legal person. So when Naomi Cunningham says, you're a man, and he says, I disagree. Like, he simply said, I disagree that I'm male and that I'm a man. I'm not a man. Now, where does this go?
The thing that really, really upset me was he adopted the usual sophistry, which I think Robin Moira White and India Willoughby have adopted. I'm a biological being. I call myself female, therefore I'm a biological female. And you are a medical doctor. We might be able to forgive India and Robin for coming out with such idiocy, but you are a medical doctor.
It's unbelievable. And so when he says stuff like that, there is a thing about, he's under oath. You're not supposed to tell porkies. Does this count as a lie, or could he argue, this is stating a belief?
No, it isn't a lie, because you can see what he's doing. He's saying quite clearly that sex doesn't exist, or I can't define it. Well, that's nonsense, but put that to one side. He's saying what matters is gender identity. My gender identity is woman. So he's not lying. He's just basing his answers on an ideological perspective, which I don't think should be given any importance. Well, no, it should be given some importance. As I've said, if he wants to wear a dress and lipstick and be called Beth, go for it. Provided you do your job properly, you're not displaying a sexual fetish out in the open, go for it. I don't care. You should be protected. You shouldn't be sacked. But he doesn't want to do that, does he? He wants to actually claim to be a woman. And the only way he can do that is to deny that biological sex is real or exists. Right. This is why I don't understand why they've chosen to die on this hill. It is insane. The vast majority of people know it to be insane. And I really don't understand why they've done this, because that's been the real cancer, hasn't it? All these organisations have had to get in line and say, oh, well, if someone says they're a woman, because there's no other way of determining it. It's all so bizarre. I mean, gosh, anyone watching us talking would have no idea who was the woman and who was the man. I mean,
right. Because we haven't done our pronouns, have we? Oh, we forgot.
To know unless we carry out a genital check. I mean, it's insane. A baby would know which of us was the man and which of us was the woman. It's perfectly bloody obvious.
But my hair is longer than yours, Sarah.
Even if I shave my head, buddy, it would still be immediately fucking obvious who is a man and who is a woman. And this is what I don't understand, why we are fighting this battle and why these men can't just say, allow me to present in a way which is traditionally and stereotypically seen as female. Please don't beat me up. Please don't sack me. Please don't harass me at work. And I would be like, fine. But they go that one step further, don't they? To deny that sex exists.
Yeah.
So they can claim to be a woman.
To pretend, like when Naomi Cunningham talked about a literal woman, like at every single turn, he would twist the language. He's like, oh, what? I don't know what you mean by literal woman. Oh, you mean a cis woman? Every single time.
And the only thing he would concede is that some women were assigned female at birth, but they weren't. They were noted. They were observed to be female, as 99.9% of us are. And then, of course, you go down that stupid rabbit hole of disorders of sexual development, which are nothing to do with any of that. And in any event, none of these men ever have a DSD. They were born male, observed male. They were male at conception. They remain male. And they can never win. They can never win because material reality will crush them. But it looks as though we're going to have to go through probably 50 years of this nonsense before we can reassert reality.
Well, hopefully what Naomi Cunningham did at that tribunal will help us get there a bit quicker, because the language that she used was so clear. Like, he's saying that sex is a nebulous dog whistle. She talks about someone being a literal woman, right? It's the complete opposite. And she said that what he was doing, and then he also said at one point, and it's like, do you not realize what you're saying here and how ironic this is? He said, just because a belief is protected, does it make it true?
Well, I think, look, this is one of the big problems that we faced, and this has annoyed a lot of people, that the fact that sex exists has had to be portrayed in these cases as a belief in order to be protected by the Equality Act. Now, this is something the government needs to step in and do something about. Maybe the For Women Scotland case will help if we can actually have biological sex pinned properly down, because the fact that sex is real and it matters is not a belief. It is a fact. And I do think being disabled has inoculated me against this fucking stupid and irritating nonsense. If I don't put my artificial leg on, I cannot walk. It is a fact that my leg was amputated. So I am very, very tethered to material reality. And I've got no time for this nonsense, because, of course, they will come for disabled people next. And indeed, they said in the trans rights advocacy that I think they've sucked the teat of the homosexual movement dry. They're looking for a new minority to force team with. And they specifically mentioned race and disability. Now, they're going to be in a bit of a shock for disability, because no one gives a shit about us. So there isn't really anything to glom onto in terms of disability. I'm interested to see how they will turn race to their advantage. But I think there's a recognition that they've probably come to the end of the line now with the forced teaming, and that is coming apart. But those of us who have to accept reality, like the disabled, well, like Black people, they have to accept reality. They can't identify as white. Rachel Dolezal can identify as Black by getting a tan and a curly hairstyle. But for those of us who can't escape reality, we really, really need to come in and defend it. So although I was really pleased that Maya won, that the nature of the victory in having sex is real and it matters protected as a belief has done harm. It's actually allowed these idiots to dismiss sex as nothing more than an opinion. So the For Women Scotland judgment is going to be really important. But if this nonsense carries on, the government has got to step in, and people have got to start losing their jobs, because I think that's the big problem at the moment. Dr. Upton's the first individual, I think, really on the line as a respondent. The others have all been witnesses. And it's only public money that's being wasted, isn't it? Who cares? People have got to start losing their jobs and really feeling the consequences of this. Otherwise, I'm afraid, 50 years hopefully is a bit too long, but it's not going to, I think we'd be in it for another decade unless this starts to bite.
Well, this is why, because I saw some people on Twitter going, why is he one of the respondents? Why is he there? And I thought it's great that he's there as a respondent, because for too long, organizations have paid the price in terms of, fines that they've had to pay or being found liable or guilty of X, Y, Z. But the individuals who've instigated these things, they've all just moved on and gone somewhere else, like we saw with Rachel Mead.
He's a very worthy respondent, because he actually bloody did things that were clearly harassment and victimization.
From what I can see, I completely agree with you. And I'm like, let that fucker just get his comeuppance, and let organizations like the NHS also know that you're being played here. Because earlier you pointed out the difference between when Sandie raised the concern herself, oh, there's a man in the women's changing room. It took months for them to get back, and then they basically said, computer says, no, we can't help. But then he raises a concern, and straight away the wheels are put in motion. Actually, that put in overdrive.
On Christmas Day, and she's suspended. It can't just be fear. I think there's got to be a huge dollop of this moral self-righteousness. Look at us. Right. We're effectively civil rights marchers on the bus in the 1960s. We're effectively preventing a lynching. We are the good and noble people of history.
Protect the vulnerable lady doctor.
It's got to be a massive part of it, because I actually don't think they're afraid. I think that this is largely fueled by self-righteousness, because Stonewall's been dripping this poison into their ears for a decade, that you have a moral duty. Oh God, because I went to some talk about EDI and heard the Director General of the BSB, they want to bring in this obligation on barristers to promote EDI. He denied Bar Standards Board, my regulator. So they want to change the code of conduct for barristers to have a positive obligation to promote EDI. Well, I won't be doing that, so there may be a tribunal with my name on it soon. But he specifically denied that EDI carried any ideological freight. And he and some other legal organisations said it's not just a legal push here, it's a moral obligation. So this is really, really dangerous. And it goes back to your point and the point so many others have made. It's not, I am right, you are wrong. I am right, you are evil. So this is at every level of every public body. They have been taught, and it must have been coming out of America. So hopefully Trump will cut that off at the source. But we've probably got another 5 years to flush it out of all the public organizations.
But that's interesting, isn't it? That was being said at a talk recently. And yesterday we had Unison, the union. That's the biggest union in the country, right? And they voted a motion through that trans women are women. And it's like, what? Where have you been?
And I had the same old, when I know I shouldn't get involved in Twitter spats. It's very undignified. I'm a middle-aged woman and a regulated. But it's not a waste of time if you enjoy it, is always my motto. And I had an exchange with Libby at Unison, because obviously Steve at Unison has turned off replies to his impeccable political stance. And I just posed my usual question. Do women have a right to single-sex female spaces? If not, why not? And I just, the usual deluge of deflection, whataboutery. It's a very simple question, and you're allowed to say no. As I said, I would have more respect for you if you said no. If you said, no, Sarah, because I think gender identity is more important than sex. So no, women don't have a right to single sex spaces. They do have a right to single gender spaces. I would disagree with you, but I would have far more respect for you than this Libby at Unison person who danced around the houses going, oh, well, don't trans women have a right to be protected? Of course. Now, could you answer my question? No, she couldn't. And I think that's really interesting, actually, because maybe I am wrong about this moral righteousness. Because if you felt truly secure and moral in your position, you would say, well, I just said, sex isn't important, gender identity is. But they continually dodge the question. That must be because they know they are wrong. They know women are a vulnerable group, and they know women have a right to single-sex female spaces, and they're too fucking cowardly to say so. So I'm going to resile from my original position. I don't think it's moral righteousness. It is also cowardice and stupidity and gullibility. Yeah, it's probably all.
I think you're right. If you drop the gender speak, everything will become clear. And I so appreciated what Naomi Cunningham did. It's been 10 days of tribunal hearings, right?
Yeah.
And every time she was super clear in her language. She's like, you're a man. There's a man in the female changing room. She talks about literal women. I mean, it's crazy that you have to use the term literal, but here we are. And she called what he did immersive role play. And I don't think I've ever heard.
She is the queen of the pithy phrase. And I think some people were getting frustrated because she wasn't going straight for the kill. But that isn't what cross-examination is like. It's very rare that you would have a whole load of just completely slam dunk questions. You have to build your case. And I think she did that very expertly. I think people were initially a bit frustrated. Why isn't she going for the jugular? Tell him he's a man.
And I have to say, because I know somebody who went there, who actually attended the hearings, like in person, and she was there. And after that first day of cross-examining Dr. Upton, she's messaging me about what the day was like. And I messaged her and said, I wish Naomi had done this or that. At the same time, it's like, I'm well aware I'm not a legal person, and I'm absolutely not going to tell Naomi how to do her job.
I mean, it is frustrating, but there's no way she wouldn't have prepared that very carefully. And the whole point of cross-examination is it's not just to find out the inconsistencies and mistakes in the evidence. It's to build your case by very carefully leading them along the road. And I think she had done that. And I think towards the end, it was quite interesting, wasn't it? Because she did go in for the kill. This is imprisonment. There's only one bully here, isn't there, Dr. Upton? And it's not the 50-year-old nurse. and the whole emperor's new clothes and the whole edifice crumbles. And that is exactly the point we've been discussing, isn't it? Without external validation, this is a nothing. It can only survive if people are compelled to believe it's real, and it must be exhausting. And I do feel sorry for these people. I think Helen Stanislav made that point in a tweet. You have to expend so much energy to scaffold a lie. It's no way to live. So again, I go back to my point. Just say, I think gender identity is really important. I think it's more important than sex. Great, fine.
And this
let's
is why.
Let's find a way to accommodate you in the workplace. And I think that way has to be to allow people to dress within reason and dress code how they wish, for men to wear makeup if they wish, for men to have long hair if they bloody tie it back, and that goes for women as well. I mean, you think I rant about trans ideology? People wafting around with long hair, I think they should all be sacked. But anyway, just dress appropriately for the job, and I don't care what it is. But instead, we're all wasting so much time and energy, aren't we?
Yeah.
Trying to argue that the sun doesn't rise, that water isn't wet, that we don't breathe air, that sex isn't real. And why are we wasting so much time? It's infuriating. I used to be quite big on campaigning around issues in family law. I've done nothing in 6 years because all my focus has been on this, because I saw this for what it is, the absolute urgent, immediate attack on freedom of speech and hence freedom of thought. And it is utterly infuriating that we are wasting our time on a bunch of middle-class, mollycoddled men, because that's what they mostly are. And it is infuriating. So this is, as everyone says, it is a men's rights movement, and it's a particular class and colour of man, isn't it?
And maybe I'm just very naive. I just don't understand what it is that motivates these men like Roxy Tickle, men like Dr. Upton, men like Morgan Augier, who campaigned for a rape shelter in Canada to have city funding taken away, and he succeeded. These men, they just don't stop, and it's like they don't just want to be told, yes, of course, you're a lady. They want to absolutely destroy.
Oh yeah, we know those men are not a mystery. That those men are motivated by sexual fetish and misogyny. That's what's motivating them. They hate women. This is a great way to get one up on women. They also get a bit of a sexual thrill seeing themselves in sexy underwear. I don't think those men are a mystery at all. The mystery is why we've allowed them so much latitude and power, because it's spilling over, isn't it, to the vulnerable children. And that's why I get frustrated with this debate. Oh, you're just a dirty pervert. Trans is a huge umbrella, and we can't just talk about vulnerable children in those terms. To justify what these AGPs have been doing, the autogynephiles, they've constructed a whole narrative and ideology that has sucked children into it. And that's just also appalling. And I don't feel that I have wasted my time, because a really important part of this, and we have had amazing success in this, is getting children safe from the ideology. And, thank God for the Cass review. And that wouldn't have happened without Kira Bell, and Kira Bell couldn't have happened without Marcus and Sue Evans. And so there has been really, really good work done. But messing about with middle-aged sexual fetishists is never a good use of time. And I'm still curious and unclear how they have gained such prominence and power.
Yeah. So we've had 10 days of this tribunal. Am I right in thinking that there was quite a bit of information that wasn't disclosed on time, so they had to chase that during the tribunal, and now it's postponed until July? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the listings are in chaos. There's not enough judges in too many cases. So if you go over your slot, you will not get a free slot for months and months and months. I think this is what happened in the LGB Alliance case as well. I think that also happened in Alison Bailey's case. They went over time. And this does seem to be entirely the fault of NHSFife, in that they are claiming that they don't have documents for important meetings, or they didn't. And Dr. Upton as well seems to have rather a shaky understanding of disclosure, or when he did or didn't take notes. And
it's like, oh, I didn't realize I was filing a formal complaint.
Yeah, exactly. But you see, it goes back to my point. They think they're right and they think they're moral. There's no need to take notes.
Right.
We're right.
They think they can just get away with it.
Yeah, there's no need to disclose the notes. We're right. But I think what happened is he initially made a really serious fitness to practice allegation, and the investigation into that, interestingly, stopped. And they have been very slow in disclosing any of the written details about that. And I think, as Naomi Cunningham has been saying, oh, come on, you definitely have got something written down. It was a career-ending allegation. I think Dr. Upton said Sandie Peggie had walked out on a patient rather than work with him. Now, that, rightly, if true, is a career-ending allegation. And Fife seemed to be saying that, goodness me, emails about that? I don't think there are any. And it's just farcical. So it's dragging out the misery for everybody. Yeah, I mean, we'll be lucky if we get this back in the tribunal for July, and then goodness knows how many more months for the judgment. I mean, don't hold your breath for a judgment this year at this rate.
Wow. And there was also this thing that if Sandie didn't look at him, he would take a note that she was ignoring him. And if she did look at him, then it was the wrong way. And yet he could not remember, when he went up to his union, the BMA, what advice they gave him in response. So it's like, if I think Naomi did a really good job. And again, she built this up bit by bit, showing that he was not a victim in any of this. He's the bloke with a chip on his shoulder, just wanting to pick someone and scream, transphobe!
You know, this is the thing I think upsets me the most, going back to, we tangentially touched on the plight of women in Afghanistan and Iran. I would like to see one of these men last a day in either of those societies. I would like to see them have an introduction to what oppression actually is. Not having your narcissistic demands catered to is not oppression. It is the world. None of us have an entitlement to get what we want when we want it. Well, none of us, it seems, apart from this particular group of men. They have a right to get whatever they want whenever they want it. But this constant bleating about oppression is, I find, utterly infuriating when we see what is happening to women around the world.
Yes, I agree. And he also shot himself in the foot. And I'm so glad he did it, because it's I mean, obviously, I'm not a judge, so I don't know how the judge is going to look at this. But he even said to Naomi Cunningham, when she questioned him, well, you don't like me. That much is obvious. And it's like, again, this is just a bloke wanting to point out, transphobe this,
really,
transphobe that.
Really unnecessary comment. It's not going to do him any
But he couldn't help himself, could he?
No, but again, it goes back to moral righteousness. She's disagreeing with him, therefore she hates him. She's evil.
Yes.
It's such a childish way of looking at the world.
When Jane Russell asked him before they let him go, how do you feel about this whole tribunal? And he went, oh, it's been horrendous, this tribunal has been harassment, not just of me, but of trans people in the whole country.
He didn't just shoot himself in the foot. He got out his AK-47 and blew both his legs off above the knee. That is a really stupid thing to have done, because he is inviting the tribunal to agree that it is an instrument of harassment. Now, I don't think any judge, however captured, would be willing to say that, to concede that, because you're effectively saying that the rule of law means nothing, and this tribunal is illegitimate because you didn't pander to my desires. That, I think, was his narcissistic flag being at full furl. It was very stupid. But of course he can't help himself, because that's what he genuinely believes, and that's what he's been told he is right to believe. But wasn't it revealing? Yeah, I would have loved to have been able to hear that. I mean, I read about it and I read all the outrage, but again, I would just love to have heard the exact tone of voice, quivering in indignation, and I would have.
I'm such a martyr for the whole country.
What a stupid thing to say, that I am above the law. But that is what he has been told to believe. So in a way, is he wholly to blame for that? Is he just a product of his environment?
Well, he's a grown-ass man. And he's a doctor, and he knows what a man and a woman is. There's no way that you're going to make me believe that he doesn't know what a man and a woman is. And I don't know how long he's been in this cult for, or what got it into, how he got it into his head that he's biologically female. I don't know. And part of, on the one hand, I'm always about like, okay, I really want to find out how somebody arrived at this position or what happened in their life. But at the same time, like so many others, I'm fed up. I'm fed up with these stupid men. I'm fed up with them getting their way. I'm fed up with people acquiescing to them. And I'm fed up with, and I'm just a spectator in this mostly. I'm not the one who was at a tribunal and bringing a case. But it's like these.
But I want to be positive because I think it's very easy to feel down and despondent. You and I could not have been having this conversation a few years ago. We would be arrested. Yeah. I would be disbarred. Yeah. So we have come a long way. And I think it's really important not to forget that. Dr. Upton wanted all of this in private and he didn't get what he wanted. Yeah. So hopefully this is the first of many. And I do worry because I do think a lot of people are just feeling really crushed and angry, and unless something happens soon, I think that is going to get worse. So I think we do need to take a breath and remind ourselves how far we have come, that I can have this conversation with you, and if anyone makes a report about me to the police or my regulator, I can tell them where to put it, because that's certainly
this is one of the reasons I want to have the chat with Akua to look at all these things that have been achieved and how all these various legal victories just keep strengthening our case. So to wrap up then, I'm really pleased with how the tribunal has gone, because it's just put so much sunlight on the actual issues and the stupid arguments. And in a way, it couldn't have gone any better than a doctor.
Well, if only we'd had a support animal. I was disappointed that there wasn't some sort of support animal. But yeah, apart from that, it was chef's kiss. Couldn't have gone any better.
And to even, like a friend of mine who was there at the tribunal, like some of the supporters of this doctor, like also blokes in dresses, they used the women's toilet at the tribunal. And this is a small toilet that is shared by everyone. So Sandie herself could have found herself in a situation in the toilet at the tribunal with a bloke in a dress when her whole case is about, can women please have women-only spaces? But overall, I just think Naomi is just like superhero woman. And Sandie was fantastic, and it's so good to see that, she's getting all the support now. And I think this will have, I just hope that this will have a really, I'm going to swear, a big fucking impact, right? That it's not going to have this little trickle effect, but that it's going to really wake up not just NHSFife, but I mean, even West Streeting, didn't he say, oh, the NHS should stop wasting their time on these stupid pronoun things?
Look, I think Trump's re-election and what he's doing is going to have an impact on what we do as well. And I think we're getting there. The For Women Scotland judgment is going to be really important. And I think this one is as well. And there's a whole slew of other cases coming up, isn't there? The Darlington nurses, you've got Sarah Summons and the Brighton provision. I think we've just got to keep hitting the pinata till it collapses.
Hit that pinata. So how does this tribunal overall sort of make you feel about things?
I've always been a one for make the obstacle the way, the great Stoic saying. I am a bit worried about this judge not getting it. But if Sandie can bear it, I think if she loses, it would go to the EAT and she would definitely win. And that would be a very interesting precedent. So I'm not going to get too upset. I hope she will win. I can't see how she can lose, because Fife have basically admitted to simply abandoning due process, suspending her without any investigation. But if she doesn't win, then I hope that's what will happen. And I can't, I've probably got another 20 years left if I'm lucky. And I'm quite happy to spend every single one of them still fighting this, because it goes to the heart of everything. I'm so fed up with hearing, why are you bothering? It's only a tiny proportion. It isn't. This is about our rights to think and speak. This affects everybody, and the impact on children. So yeah, I'm tired. I think we're all tired, but I'm cautiously hopeful that maybe the end will be in sight. But if it's not, I'm not going to stop fighting. It is too important.
Yes, and I shall be there by your side.
Yay!
But I'll have my hair up so my long hair doesn't
All good,
frustrate
because
you.
we don't want to get confused now, do we? I don't want to go, where's Mr. Menno? I'm looking for a man, and there's all this long hair. It's so confusing.
So confusing. Anyway, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so
lovely to
much.
speak to you. Well, thank you for asking me. And I always enjoy having a good rant, so thanks for that.
And you're going to go off and see a movie now, huh?
Yes, Bridget Jones, she knows what a man is. You'll notice that in the famous line from the trailer, she isn't stuck up the magic non-binary tree, is she? So I'm going to be looking forward to some good old-fashioned entertainment where a woman's a woman and a man's a man. So I should be having a good evening, and I hope you do too. Thanks very much for the chat.
Okie dokie. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to my PayPal and Patreon supporters. Because of you, I can make videos like this. Special shout out to my big spenders. Help Her Open, Mama Turv and the Turventines, me Julie, the lovely Mary, Julia, Dusty, Judels, Leffy, Dorothy, Wildfire, Esther, and Martha. Thank you.